All right, today we're going to have a little discussion about ancient Greek philosophy, a little discussion. Now, there's a ton of Greek philosophers in your textbook, and yeah, they were influential, a lot of them were, but ultimately now in the history of psychology, as we already hinted, as we said in the last discussion that we had, we're moving forward. Francis Bacon is going to merge the dominant theories, dominant philosophies of rationalism and empiricism, and merge them together with this thing he's going to call science. Okay. So stepping back, that's a hint which is saying rationalism and empiricism are the two dominant philosophies throughout the ages. And where do these come from? And it turns out that Plato's thoughts basically form the basis of rationalism, and Aristotle's thoughts basically form the foundation of empiricism. So though the other philosophers are important, it is Plato and Aristotle which really become the foundation principles of the major philosophies of the age, which then become science. So I'm going to focus my discussion for this particular chapter on ancient Greek philosophy on Plato and Aristotle. Okay? So what we have here is a nice little map of Greece. I love it. Ancient Greece and surrounding areas. Now, I'm a map nerd. I love maps. Maps are so cool. But what I want you to point out is, see, what a lot of people don't realize is that when you say Greece at that time in history, you meant a whole hell of a lot more than just Greece. All the way up through Italy, all the way through Turkey, all the way up through Macedonia, up into the Balkans. It was all Greece. I mean, the Hellenistic world. Hell, even Egypt was part of Greece. Okay. Um, we always hear about how Rome conquered the world, but the fact is Greece conquered the world, except they didn't make colonies exactly. They made settlements, okay? And so we find that Greek people would go to these different places up in perhaps Italy and Sicily and stuff and settle there and create villages and develop these civilizations there. But the fact is, they also brought their ideas with them, their Greek ideas, their Greek ways of thinking. God forbid the Greek philosophies they brought with them. Okay? And so Greek thinking dominated the ancient world, even into times when the Romans military occupied them. They still had Greek thinking. Okay? Here's a couple of things to break it down. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not saying history starts with the Greeks, but here's the deal. At some point in your discussions, you were going to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All right, and in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm not talking about it. I just want to mention this one point: is that you must satisfy your base level biological needs before you can do higher level needs. And of course, at the very top of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization, the need to become who you're supposed to be or something like that. But the fact is, if you're hungry, you don't give a shit about your destiny and your life's calling. This is just not important. If you don't have safety, you don't care about your life's calling. These things aren't important to you. Well, it turned out that before the ancient Greeks really settled, not just settled, but really made it so that when a person woke up in the morning, they didn't feel that they were going to die that day, okay? Because they had a military, they had organized structures, they had laws, they had legal codes. And so people could wake up in the morning and feel safe. And without this basic needs being met by ancient Greece, people could never satisfy level needs or their self-actualization needs, which is to say, thinking. Not only that, but you had this system in place now where agriculture was now well established. And agriculture, from a simple perspective, is this. I mean, if you're a hunter-gatherer and you're spending every day running through the woods, good luck on developing philosophy. Or until you have a settlement, everybody ends up making their own stuff. I mean, you have to make your own shoes. But I make sucky shoes. Doesn't matter, okay? Because everybody does what they do. So what happens is agriculture allows for permanent settlement. What permanent settlement allows for is specialization of labor. Because the fact is, with agriculture, one farmer can produce food for 3, 4, 5. Oops, my fingers don't match. 5 people. All right? And if one farmer produces, there it is. Ha! One farmer produces food for 5 people, that means the farmer fed himself, and now there's 4 people that can do other stuff, like specialize in making shoes, or specialize in making baskets, or specialize in thinking. Okay? You can't have this kind of a leisure class that sits around all day and thinks until you've got agriculture leading to permanent settlements, leading to specialization of labor, and all of that while at the same time having safety needs being met. Okay? And so all of these things together fed into and made possible the beginnings of Greek philosophy. Okay? All right. First off, I'm going to talk Plato. Number one, Plato was Socrates' student. Now, Socrates is an interesting fellow, but as far as, unless you're in a philosophy class, the reason Socrates is important is because his ideas lay the groundwork for Plato. But yet it's really Plato's ideas which are really grabbed upon throughout history, not Socrates' ideas. So Socrates is most important to us as Plato's teacher. Okay, and so when Socrates died, maybe you guys remember Plato's Republic, and Socrates was arrested for corrupting the youth of Athens, I believe was the crime. I believe he was arrested for homosexuality and etc. He goes in and etc. etc. And Socrates kills himself right in the bathtub. Read Plato's Republic; it's an interesting story. He kills himself, drinks hemlock, slits his wrist. Plato says, Athens, you don't deserve me. You killed my Socrates, the wisest man that ever existed, and yet you had the courage to kill him. You don't deserve me. So he goes off and takes off and goes into exile. While Plato is in exile, he comes across the Pythagoreans, and we're going to talk about the Pythagoreans because they're pretty cool. And he's out there and he studies with the Pythagoreans, and he comes back to Athens with these thoughts in his head, in particular the Pythagorean philosophy. Okay? So what does he figure out? Okay, here's the deal. Maybe you guys know the Pythagorean theorem. Oh, Lord, here comes your math. Okay? The Pythagorean theorem, and it would help if I had a whiteboard at this point, but I'll demonstrate. Remember, if you have a right triangle, gotta pretend it's a right triangle. Okay, there. Perfect. There it is. Perfect right triangle. And then the long side is the hypotenuse, and these are the 2 legs. Sound familiar? Yes? Okay. It turns out that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? That the length of leg 1 squared plus the length of leg 2 squared will equal the length of the hypotenuse squared. Okay. Well, you don't need to know the math behind it, but what it really comes down to is that in some kind of an abstract way, that is a beautiful truth of the world. It is so perfect. It is so wonderful. It is so true. But now, in the real world, let's draw a triangle. Let's draw one. Ding, ding, ding. And guess what? The Pythagorean theorem will never exactly work because no matter how good your tools are, your lines are going to be off by a little bit. Your angles are going to be slightly less than perfectly 90. It's just something is never going to be quite exactly right. And so the basic idea that the Pythagoreans said was, in some abstract sense, there's perfection. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. But in truth, in the world that we live in, it'll never be true. You can't draw a triangle that actually makes a squared plus b squared equals c squared, even though in some beautiful true sense it's true. Okay? And so here's the idea. Is Plato said, okay, this idea is true of everything, that there are 2 different worlds, a world of existence that we have and a world of perfection up above. Now, this world of perfection up above has some relationship to the world that you're in, because of course a squared plus b squared equals c squared is beautiful in truth, or beautiful in theory, but in truth it comes close. A squared plus b squared equals c squared does do an awful good job of explaining, but it's not perfect. Okay? And he says this physical world that we live in is less than perfect. Okay? So now, according to Plato, here's the deal. This is, by the way, this is mystical and wacky. But get ready. Here's Plato's notion. He says, look, before you were born, your soul dwelled in the heavens. And in the heavens was that perfection. That a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where everything is perfect, where everything exists and is true. And your soul existed with this truth. And we're going to talk about the forms in a second. Your soul existed with the truth. Then your soul was born into this imperfect body. And this imperfect body of yours has gotten experiences that are imperfect. Like, try to draw a triangle that actually makes it true. Okay? And he says, the problem is the experiences that you have in this imperfect world is messing you up. The fact is, true knowledge in this does not come from this imperfect world, says Plato. This imperfect world is imperfect. Instead, true knowledge comes from the heavens, because that's where the truth really lies. But how the hell are you going to know the heavens? Well, here's the deal, says Plato. Your soul was up there dwelling with the heavens. Good news, your soul didn't forget. Your soul kind of got sidetracked by all kinds of things in this physical world that aren't real. But guess what? Your soul still remembers, okay? So, says Plato, if you want to know truth, you do not look at this world in front of you, because in this world you can never draw a triangle that will actually make a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You cannot draw it. But your soul knows that perfection. Look inside your soul. Introspect. Boy, is that going to be a big word later on in this course. Introspect. Okay? You introspect on your own soul's knowledge. Okay? Here's a little side note. The soul has three components according to Plato. The rational part, the courageous part, the appetitive part. Okay? Appetitive, courageous, and rational. Does this sound like, let's see, appetitive equals id, courageous equals ego, rational equals superego? I don't know. I could be wrong. Three parts of the soul create conflict, and this conflict provides motivation. OMG, dude, okay? You want to talk about funky, man. Not only that, but take a look at this bottom line, which you can't read because my face is covering it. The supreme goal in life is to release the soul from the Alright, in other words, it sounds like the basis of Christian thinking as well, okay? So what an interesting thought here. I just didn't, trust me, I'm going to badmouth Freud a lot, but come on, look at this. This is Freud's theory right here. What the hell did Freud do? Oy. Alright, so now, stepping back, in fact, I didn't put it here, but now, Plato's notion, in particular this part here, in fact, I want to talk about the forms. I didn't have that on here. Oh, yeah, I have it right there, the theory of the forms. Okay, here's the deal. Now, in this world, as I said, the heavens are perfect and this world is messed up. Okay, so here's the deal. I look around and I see a dog. Okay, lovely. And then I see another dog. But guess what? They're like completely different from each other. One's a Chihuahua, one's a Poodle. And there's another dog, and it's a German Shepherd. And there's another dog, and hell, it's another German Shepherd. But guess what? Even the German Shepherds are different. They're all different. Okay? So what the hell is a dog? What do you mean, dog? What does dog mean? Okay? And so here's what Plato said. In the heavens, there is this form of a dog. A perfect dog. What does dog mean? Okay? Your soul knows, by the way, because your soul is hanging up there with a perfect dog. I don't know what that means, dude, alright? But your soul knows what that perfect dog means. And so if you want to have knowledge, true knowledge, says Plato, true knowledge is knowledge of the forms. True knowledge is not looking at this dog right here, this little Chihuahua, and this Poodle, and this German Shepherd, and this German Shepherd. You ain't going to learn shit, says Plato, because true knowledge comes from the heavens, because that's the only truth that exists, is the heavens. And your soul knows that. And so, says Plato, knowledge can never come from studying the physical world in front of you. It can only come by introspecting, turning into yourself, and finding the answer, because your soul already knows the answer. This is rationalism. This is the basis of the philosophy of rationalism. Rationalism, as we said, is this belief that truth comes from within rather than from without. Okay? So, as we said in the little analogy to start this show, Plato is to rationalism. Hint, hint in my analogy. Okay? Alright, I knew I had to come back to that one. And so now comes Aristotle. Alright. Now, Aristotle was Socrates' student. Not Socrates, my bad. Socrates taught Plato. Plato taught Aristotle. All right? And, of course, we know that Aristotle is a court physician for Alexander the Great. He was Alexander the Great's tutor, etc. But anyway, he establishes the Lyceum in Athens, which is the world's first university. And that's pretty cool. I like that. You know what Aristotle did throughout his life? He did this. Okay? He said the same thing. I mean, this question was a big question. What do you mean dog? What the hell is dog, right? As we already said, Plato says, all right, these essences, the essence of a dog, what a dog is, the form of a dog, it exists independent of any one dog here, and you can only find it through introspection. Aristotle said, no. Dude, if you want to know what a dog really is, you should study 10 dogs and find out what they have in common. No, 20 dogs. No, 50 dogs. No, 1,000 dogs. No, 1,000,000 dogs. And find out what all of these dogs have in common. Because if you can find what 1,000,000 dogs share in common, then that is the essence of what you mean when you say the word dog. Okay? And so, according to Aristotle, true knowledge comes from studying the physical world. And not just studying the physical world, but studying the physical world over and over and over and over and over and over and finding commonalities. It's very, I mean, this is the basis of much of scientific logic. I mean, if you want to know, hell, if you were in a stats class, it goes like this, okay? If you have a sample of size 5 and get the average, what does the average mean? I don't know. If you have a sample of size 10,000 and get the average, what does it mean? Probably something, all right? The larger your sample size, the more likely you are to reveal some kind of truthfulness, okay? So this is a basis for statistics and experimentation. But Aristotle also, and in fact, let me step back that for 1 second, because the second part of the analogy was that Plato is to rationalism as Aristotle is to empiricism. Obviously, this notion that true knowledge can only come not just from seeing the physical world, but seeing it over and over and over and over and over and over. Okay? And it is this which forms the basis for empirical philosophy. So Plato forms a basis for rationalistic philosophy. Aristotle forms a basis for empirical philosophy. But Aristotle had a lot of other things to say as well, and I want to touch on a couple that are potentially particularly interesting for our purposes. Aristotle argued for this thing called teleology. It's quite an interesting philosophy. Nature has a purpose. Okay, teleology is sort of belief. Okay, that things have, there is no randomness. Okay, that this is sort of like I said, the basis of scientific thinking is determinism, and this is sort of like things have a purpose. They have a, he talks about the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, etc. But ultimately he talks about the final cause. And the final cause is the purpose for which an object exists. Now, I've already briefly mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of beliefs earlier. And I'm going to come back to Maslow's hierarchy of beliefs because at the very top of his hierarchy, and you study one of your other courses, I mean, this is not the course where I'm talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but at the very top of that pyramid, you're going to find self-actualization. Self-actualization is in a lot of ways the purpose for your existence. What is self-actualization? The reason you were born, your purpose in life. If you're coming out of a Christian church, they call it your calling. What is your calling? What is your purpose? What is your reason? And according to Aristotle, this is what he called his final cause. Okay? Entelechy is sort of a energy, perhaps. That's the best I can come up with. An energy in the universe that's pushing us to fulfill our final cause. Okay, and so we talk about an acorn. An acorn is, what is it made of? I don't know. Acorn shit. I don't know. What is the form? Roundy-ish. I don't know. What is the efficient cause? The force that transforms it? Water and sunlight. I don't know. But what is the final cause? An oak tree. That is the reason that an acorn exists. And the universe, according to this concept, the universe wants that acorn to become an oak tree because that is what it's supposed to do. And this is how Abraham Maslow proposes human thinking, is that you have a purpose. You have a reason for existence. And the world wants you to become that. This is humanistic psychology 101. The world wants you to become that. I'll get more detail later when we talk humanism. But the universe wants you to fulfill your purpose, just like the universe wants that acorn to become an oak tree. The universe wants you to fulfill your calling. Okay? And so in addition to the entelechy that each object possesses independently, each oak tree, there's also a grand scale. Okay? That is a grand scale that nature wants everything to be. It's not just independent of each other. Nature is arranged in a hierarchy, okay? And this scala naturae, I can't pronounce that, right, is going to pop up an awful lot in some of the later philosophies. On top of all of this stuff, Aristotle also put together the laws of association. And the laws of association, which aren't really necessarily appropriate for them, I mean, not appropriate, that's all appropriate, become humongous. Because these laws of association are later on picked up by, and become the basis of empirical philosophy. John Locke is going to expand on these later, because the idea is, as we said with empiricism, all knowledge comes from observation of the physical world, and therefore, as John Locke is going to take it extensively, he's going to talk about the tabula rasa, you're born empty, and nothing. And so what the laws of association are is a way to explain, okay? I looked at a cow, I looked at a barn. Now what? How do I, the laws of association explain how these two separate observations can be combined together based on the law of, what is this one in this case? Contiguity. A contiguity. And that is cows, barns. Cows, barns. Cows, barns. Guess what? This becomes the entire basis of all learning theory to this day. If you take the learning class, you'll find that these laws of association form the basis of everything in the entire discipline of learning. Okay? So he established everything even back then. So this early Greek philosophy was incredibly important. It was silly, especially when we think about Plato and his mystical stuff, but it's not really that outdated. We moved from supernatural to natural causes. We started to move a little bit from the gods are angry, and we started to see something that you could tangible, some search for. There was a recognition that there was a natural cause for it, that it wasn't the gods are angry, okay? And it tolerated criticism, and boy, that's important, because I'll tell you what, as we talked about in the previous presentation with Thomas Kuhn, science is nothing more than the buildup of paradigms, normal science, problems are arising with the paradigm, bing, paradigm shift, okay? Paradigm shifts, which is what Kuhn says is what science is all about, cannot exist if you don't have toleration of criticism. Criticism is saying, yeah, I know that your belief is this, but look, I found something different. That's the very basis of the paradigm shifts that Kuhn talked about in the previous chapter. Without the ability to criticize and find false knowledge, you cannot ever progress. You will always be stuck where you are. And so ancient Greek philosophy becomes the root of all modern scientific thinking. And I've got this picture here. I love this image. It's such a beautiful image. I want to find that for my home or something. It's a very nice Raphael's picture of the School of Athens, but it's kind of hilarious because he brings together all kinds of people that did not exist at the same time. I mean, this could never have existed, this painting. And half of these philosophers he paints with no with no model to work with, right? All he's got is references. How half of these people, there's not even any existing work by them. There's just references. Socrates makes reference to or something, all right? And so Raphael used some modern thinkers of his own time as models for it. He just threw random crap in. But I love this picture, all right? I love this picture. Now, don't let me distract you from this reason that we talked about this chapter. Is this early Greek philosophy? It created the basis for all scientific thinking. Rationalism, empiricism, the ability to question authority, tolerating criticism. These things are going to be necessary. They're going to form the groundwork for that science, and we're going to get to that science in a couple more chapters. All right? We'll see you next time.